outside says this here school is for instructions in the martial arts.
There was once a whispered line that sounded like an urban legend. There's a man nearly 2 meters tall who steps into the frame as if the darkness flips a switch and starts glowing. He doesn't act. He overwhelms. At first, everyone scoffed. It sounded exaggerated. It sounded like advertising. But then they pressed play, and every doubt evaporated within seconds. Because on screen, Sho'nuff appeared. Not a character, not a role, but a force of gravity. Julius John Carry III, the Shogun of Harlem in The Last Dragon. 1985 charged into the frame with eyes that looked like they could tear the screen apart, a voice that rumbled like thunder, and an acting precision so razor-sharp it made people genuinely believe he was a warlord ruling an entire city. Decades later, viewers still joke, every rumor about Sho'nuff wasn't strong enough. But Julius Carry was not just Sho'nuff. He was a long journey stretching from windy Chicago to the bright lights of Hollywood. The Chicago-born boy grew up standing nearly 1.96 meters tall, with a presence that forced any stage to yield space. Few know that before entering film, Julius was a serious, formally trained stage actor who honed his craft at the Chicago Actors Repertory Company before moving to Los Angeles to continue his academic path at Loyola Marymount University in search of a bigger opportunity. And that opportunity came not with instant fame, but with the truth skill discipline and the ability to turn every role into a small legend. This video will take you through moments people once thought were exaggerated, inflated, or merely stories passed around, until they saw them with their own eyes. You're about to enter the world of Julius Carry, where things that seem impossible are simply things that happened. Prepare yourself, because once the story begins, you'll understand why he was called a legend no one would believe, unless it was captured on camera. The man behind Sho'nuff's armor. If you only look at Julius John Carry III under the blazing red lights of the Shogun of Harlem, you might think he was the same fierce, intense, extreme persona Hollywood cast him as. But the funny thing, and what surprises people most, is that Julius Carry in real life was almost the exact opposite of the character he embodied on screen. One man, two selves, one explosive in film, and one calm, reserved kind, and composed enough to catch you off guard. Born on March 12, 1952 in Chicago, Julius Carry grew up in a working-class family in the Lake Meadows area, where black children in the 1960s often faced fundamental barriers, lack of educational resources, ever-present discrimination, and limited development opportunities. But Carry didn't grow up fueled by anger or reckless rebellion. The first thing everyone recalls about him, from classmates and teachers to later colleagues, is his calmness. A boy taller than everyone else, but the quietest in the room, always observing, more than expressing. The turning point came at age 15, when Carry joined the Spartan Players Theater Group. What surprised his teachers wasn't his acting, but his attitude. Julius Carry worked like an adult, arriving earliest, focusing hardest, and never once asking to skip rehearsal. When practicing lines, he shaped each word as if perfecting a fundamental skill. When performing emotion, he chose to study character psychology rather than exaggerate a rarity for a teenager. Those who acted with him said, Carry could shift from silent to fully immersed in one breath, as if flipping a switch to exit himself and step into the role. And perhaps it was during this time that a truth began to take shape. Julius Carry in real life preferred distance from noise and attention. He disliked arguments and avoided showing off. Classmates recalled that even with his towering height over 1.90 meters by age 17, he always lowered his head slightly when speaking, as if trying to lessen the natural dominance of his body. When he moved to Los Angeles to study at Loyola Marymount University, he carried with him a life of discipline. Sleeping early, reading extensively, committing to academic training. Unlike many young actors who came to LA chasing fame, Carry arrived with a simple mindset. He wanted to study acting like learning a trade, like mastering a technique, and he excelled. Not only earning a bachelor's degree in theater and television, he continued to obtain a master's degree in communications, something extremely rare among actors. Classmates said Carry was so serious, it sometimes made others feel they needed to work harder. His script analysis resembled academic research, layering, breaking down, annotating every detail. When directors gave notes, he never reacted defensively, only asking, "What do I need to change?" No excuses, no explanations, just action. In real life, Julius Carry possessed a quietly courteous personality. Colleagues said he always held the door for others, entering a room, always let co-stars speak first in joint interviews, and always accepted blame if he thought he slowed production. He wasn't someone who tried to make people laugh, nor the type to talk excessively to create atmosphere. He connected through respect. What astonished people most was the contrast between his appearance and temperament. Carry's physique, tall, deep-voiced, sharp-eyed, often made strangers assume he was easily angered. But the truth, he almost never raised his voice. Filmmakers, co-stars, and crew members all confirmed Julius Carry was one of the least demanding actors they had ever worked with. Throughout his more than 30-year career, he appeared in dozens of television series: Murphy's Law, The Adventures of Brisco County Jr., Boy Meets World, The District Saving Grace. In every project, he was described as professional to the bone. He arrived on time, never complained, learned his lines so thoroughly he could sometimes recite entire scenes backwards. Directors often said Carry was the kind of actor any production dreamed of having: no drama, no attitude, no demands for special treatment, even though he could easily have leveraged his stature and talent to exert pressure. But Carry disliked that. He once said, "I just want to do my job well. No one owes me their attention." His quiet nature also meant his private life remained discreet. Despite appearing regularly on television, Carry had almost no scandals, no controversies, no provocative statements. He married, kept his family life private, and when he divorced, everything happened quietly. No tabloids, no interviews, no public dispute. Even when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, the disease that took his life in 2008 at age 56, Julius Carry didn't make a public announcement. He continued working until near the end, sharing the news only with a few close friends. One of them recalled Julius didn't want anyone to feel burdened. He didn't want pity. He wanted to be remembered as someone who worked until the very end. That is exactly what happened. After his passing, directors, actors, and producers posted tributes. What stood out most was not praise for his talent, but praise for his character. Everyone used the same phrase, "a kind man." The strange and beautiful thing about Julius Carry is the duality within him, a gentle, quiet, polite man, who once the camera rolled transformed into a force explosive, fierce, almost supernatural. And it is this contrast that keeps audiences endlessly fascinated, because the truth of his life was simple, silent, while the truth on screen was larger than life. No one believed the man who became Sho'nuff could be so humble, so disciplined, so gentle, until they heard the real stories about Julius Carry. The technical engine hidden behind Sho'nuff, the reason Julius Carry's portrayal of Sho'nuff became a phenomenon, is not just because of his style lines or striking design. The deeper reason, one rarely analyzed, lies in the acting techniques Carry deployed beneath that blazing red armor. Many people think he overdid it, exaggerated, or overacted for fun. But anyone who has studied theater or reviewed physical performance analyses in film notices the opposite. Carry used formal, structured, academically grounded techniques finely tuned to create a Sho'nuff, whose mere appearance dominated the entire frame. Classically trained stage actors often repeat one saying, "It's not about being big, it's about being big with control." Julius Carry did exactly that. Every gesture step and the way he held his body's energy stayed in a calculated state, like an opera performer controlling each muscle to support vocal range. To understand Sho'nuff, you must dissect him not as a film character, but as a physical theater project. The secret lies in the active power stance. Carry never stood straight. He widened his shoulders, gently pulled his elbows away from his torso, and created a horizontal span larger than natural. This made his body occupy extra space, similar to how stage performers use blocking to dominate a large stage. On camera, an expansion of only 5 to 10% is enough to make a character appear larger. Carry increased nearly 25%. Yet strangely, it never felt over the top because he balanced it with looseness in his core, hips, and back, relaxed. This is a technique balancing physical expansion with natural posture. Very few film actors use it because it requires deep stage foundations. The next element that created the Sho'nuff effect was movement modulation, tempo rhythm. Untrained actors often exaggerate by moving fast. Carry did the opposite. He moved 0.25–0.5 seconds slower than the film's internal rhythm. This made the character look too confident, never rushed, aware that he's stronger than everyone. This wasn't spontaneous inspiration. It's a taught technique in theater schools for portraying a dominant figure. When analyzing each scene, you'll notice Sho'nuff's pace is completely different from other characters, slower, heavier, yet always steady. When he enters the frame, the rhythm of others shifts automatically. The third aspect rarely noticed is vocal control. Julius Carry naturally had a bass baritone voice, but as Sho'nuff, he deliberately pushed it into the mask resonance area, facial resonance, to create a tone that seemed to echo from within. This made his lines sound both real and performative. This technique is common in Shakespearean or classical French theater, where actors must project far without shouting. Carry almost never yelled in the film. He merely sharpened consonants and elongated vowels to create power. For example, "Who's the master" isn't a scream, it's projection with control. Loud, but without throat tension. Another key factor was eye control. Most villains use wide-eyed intensity. Carry did something else. He held his eyes open longer, about 1.5 to 2 seconds, without blinking. This is the stillness technique, stillness that creates pressure. The interesting part, when someone doesn't blink, audiences instinctively perceive them as more dangerous. Carry understood this and used it extremely effectively. Another important element was the contrast ratio between gesture and space. When Sho'nuff delivered a powerful line, Carry often kept his entire body still, moving only one tiny detail, a finger, a wrist, or a 10-degree head tilt. The contrast between still body-moving detail created tension similar to how Japanese kabuki masters portray powerful characters. It's no coincidence Sho'nuff was called an urban samurai. Carry did not imitate samurai aesthetics, he imitated samurai acting technique. Alongside that, in confrontation scenes, Carry used the weight shift technique, shifting weight between his legs in sync with dialogue. Every time he shifted meaning in a sentence, his center of gravity shifted as well. This technique controls internal energy, helping audiences see the character's strength even when he does nothing. In scenes like Sho'nuff entering the movie theater or facing Bruce Leroy, you can clearly notice each foot change corresponds with a tonal shift. You cannot overlook facial muscle ratios. Carry used only 3 mouth-shape patterns for most of his lines. This repetition created a signature expression. It made Sho'nuff memorable, recognizable, and highly iconic. Audiences assumed it was showboating, but it was actually a minimalist technique for consistent villain expression. The astonishing thing is that although all these techniques are complex, Carry made them look so natural that many people assumed he was just wildly dancing and shouting. The truth is that everything was structured like a physical choreography. No movement was wasted. No gesture was random. Everything stayed on the razor-thin boundary between cinematic exaggeration and stage technique. That's why when critics revisited the role years later, they said Sho'nuff's energy was impossible to recreate. Not because the costume was cool, not because the lines were catchy, but because Julius Carry had such a strong technical foundation that he created a character so precise he felt like a real creature. A character seemingly bizarre, exaggerated. Yet when you look deeper into the technique behind him, you understand why Julius Carry made audiences believe Sho'nuff truly existed. The transformation of performance. When shedding Sho'nuff's armor, if you only look at Julius Carry in The Last Dragon, you might think Hollywood had stamped a claim on him. This is the villain. This is the giant. This is the power. But the truth goes in the opposite direction. The man who created Sho'nuff, a character so fierce that many believed he could never escape. That image was in fact one of the most versatile actors of his generation. The first surprise was how quickly Carry transformed after 1985. Almost immediately, he stepped away from the high-intensity villain style and moved into television, where the rhythm, pacing, and physical language were entirely different and much lighter. At the time, audiences couldn't believe it. Sho'nuff in a sitcom. Sho'nuff doing comedy. Sho'nuff becoming a calm father figure. But when Carry appeared on the small screen, every preconceived assumption collapsed. One of the clearest examples is his role as Lord Bowler in The Adventures of Brisco County Jr., 1993-1994. On paper, Bowler is a notorious bounty hunter, but Carry didn't build him as a villain. Instead, he crafted a character who was humorous, sometimes clumsy, sometimes tough, and sometimes oddly warm. And just as he had done with Sho'nuff, Julius Carry didn't act like an action movie character. He analyzed and reconstructed Bowler as a layered emotional figure. From adversary, Bowler became a loyal companion, forming one of the most memorable duos in 1990s television. What surprised viewers wasn't that Carry acted well, but that he acted so naturally audiences forgot he had played the Shogun of Harlem just a few years earlier. Television continued to give Julius Carry opportunities to show he was not trapped in any mold. In Murphy Brown, Carry displayed sharp comedic timing, a skill found only in actors who truly understand sitcom rhythm. In Boy Meets World, he portrayed Mr. Turner in a special episode, a gentle, approachable role with no trace of villainy or theatrical intensity. Young viewers who watched the series back then had no idea he had once been Sho'nuff. This reveals two truths. Carry's flexibility was extraordinarily high, and his acting strength made audiences believe in every character immediately. In many other television programs, The District Family Law, Grace Under Fire, The Sinbad Show, Julius Carry continued proving he could become whoever the director needed: a lawyer, a police officer, a comedic friend, a difficult co-worker, or a strict father. No role resembled another. This stood in complete contrast to the image Hollywood usually imposed on large-framed actors, who were often cast repeatedly in roles defined by tough, intimidating, powerful archetypes. Carry broke this pattern through meticulous preparation and deliberate performance choices. The reason audiences initially doubted he could shift so drastically is easy to understand. Carry's appearance and voice were too strong, too sharp, too distinctive. Tall actors with deep voices are usually placed in the same casting box: security guards, villains, fighters, intimidating police officers. But Julius Carry refused to accept that. When reading sitcom scripts, he didn't translate the character into Sho'nuff style. He erased every trace, adjusted his breathing rhythm, changed his speech. Tempo, narrowed his shoulder stance, softened facial tension, altered vocal placement, becoming almost an entirely different person. Those who worked with Carry recalled that he prepared for every television role as if preparing for a stage exam. He never winged it. He studied how the character walked, laughed, held eye contact, stood while speaking, or sat when tense. For Lord Bowler, Carry spent days observing cowboy movement in classic westerns to find the correct physical rhythm: long steps, slow heel impact weight slightly forward. It's a detail few ever notice. But when you watch the show, Bowler has an authentic cowboy essence even within a comedy series, and that can only come from technical preparation. For sitcoms like Murphy Brown or Boy Meets World, Carry adjusted his voice and speech tempo to sitcom timing, meaning quicker, lighter, and more flexible, with no elongated tones, like in action films. When performing emotional scenes, he softened facial intensity, changed his breathing method, and used gentle eye expressions to create warmth. Anyone who had seen Sho'nuff would never recognize him. The key point is this: Julius Carry never wavered. He maintained absolute control. And this mastery, not his physical strength, was the reason he could transform every time he changed roles. On screen, Carry could become a completely different character simply by shifting his body tempo or vocal quality. This was not natural talent, it was technique built from his years of theater training and early stage experience. Looking back at Carry's extensive television career, from action to comedy drama to science fiction, you see a clear truth: acting technique, not physical appearance, is what defines an actor's ability. And Julius Carry is the strongest proof of that. Sho'nuff may be a legend on the big screen, but it was the small roles, comedic roles, supporting roles on television that truly revealed his real power: diverse, flexible, and unbound by any physical stereotype. Extraordinary memory, and the almost unbelievable behind-the-scenes stories. Even people who worked with Julius Carry admit this. There are behind-the-scenes stories they would never have believed if they hadn't heard them directly from the crew. The idea that a man standing 6'5", about 196 centimeters, with a metallic baritone and an overpowering presence like Sho'nuff could also be the author of countless moments so unbelievable they sound like folklore, that alone feels impossible. One of the earliest stories documented in The Last Dragon production notes was that Carry read all 3 script volumes in a single night. The crew scheduled 3 days for dialogue rehearsals because the character had long, complex lines. Yet the next morning, Carry showed up holding a folded script and recited every line on beat, on rhythm, without looking down. Director Michael Schultz said in 1999 that he had never met anyone with such powerful short-term memory. Although many viewers think Sho'nuff is a role that screams more than it acts, every line was memorized and executed by Julius, with syllable-level precision. Another behind-the-scenes truth from The Last Dragon that seems impossible is that Carry had absolutely no martial arts background. He had never learned karate, never trained in kung fu, didn't know defensive stances, and had never delivered a proper kick. Yet with only 10 days of physical movement and stance coaching, he recreated a fighting aura, convincing enough that many believed he was a trained fighter. Stunt coordinators recalled that when they showed Carry a few minutes of Bruce Lee footage, he mimicked 80% of the movement rhythm. As a result, the close combat scenes didn't break the illusion. They instead produced an odd, half-real, half-symbolic quality that made Sho'nuff feel like a fighter belonging to no recognizable discipline. Even more surprising was his endurance with the costume, which designer Marlene Stewart confirmed weighed nearly 12–13 kilos. The oversized shoulder armor, the red outer robe, the handcrafted pieces already made movement difficult, and the added weight made it even more taxing. In many scenes, Carry had to maintain an expanded stance, chest forward, chin, slightly raised, already tiring, and then carry an additional 13 kilos. Yet he never once complained, even refusing a proposal to reduce the weight, because he wanted the character to look as heavy as the ruler of Harlem should. Thanks to this sacrifice, every step he took had compression and density, giving the sense that Sho'nuff had walked straight out of a comic book into real life. In complete contrast to his ferocity on screen, many crew members said they were shocked when meeting Julius for the first time. A nearly 2-meter-tall man, with a powerful voice and sharp eyes. But in real life, he spoke softly, behaved politely, and even had the habit of holding doors open for others. Taimak, the film's lead actor, said Carry was the most courteous person on set, and often the peacemaker whenever tensions rose. The distance between the real man and the character was so vast that many fans refused to believe Sho'nuff was played by someone so gentle until they watched interviews or heard colleagues talk about him. One of the most astonishing behind-the-scenes moments was the scene where Sho'nuff enters the movie theater, the scene that later became a viral meme across the internet. Few know that the crew had to stop filming multiple times because extras literally ran away. Each time Carry shouted, "Who dares to challenge Sho'nuff?" instinctively, many people jumped up and looked for the emergency exits. Filming had to halt, and Carry had to walk down each row explaining that he was just acting. This natural level of intimidation, not from visual effects, not from enhanced audio, became undeniable proof of his almost unreal immersion into the role. Another habit. The crew never forgot Carry always asked to watch the dailies, the raw footage of each shooting day, so he could adjust every physical detail. In the 1980s and 1990s, it was not common for actors to request frame-by-frame reviews. But Carry examined face angles, shoulder rotations, arm extension width, and head tilt rhythm to ensure the character's physical language remained consistent. He said in a 1994 interview that if the camera angle was wrong, the character would lose its power. That is why every Sho'nuff appearance looks exactly like Sho'nuff, regardless of lighting or camera position. But perhaps the strangest story lies in the smallest habit. Julius Carry was always the one cleaning up props after a scene. Production designers said he often picked up chairs, coiled cables, gathered cloaks, and put everything back in place with almost obsessive neatness. They said that if they hadn't seen it themselves, no one would believe the Shogun of Harlem was the tidiest person on set. These everyday actions, cleaning, lifting cables, arranging props, stood in stark contrast to his fierce on-screen persona and became one of the most surprising highlights among the countless stories about him. When pieced together, all these stories form a complete paradox. Julius Carry made audiences believe in a character so outrageous, it seemed like he belonged only in comic books, yet simultaneously made his own colleagues disbelieve how gentle, disciplined, and professional he was in real life. What people often call the legend of Sho'nuff is actually the product of an artist with exceptional memory, rigorous discipline, intense focus, strong mimicking ability, and a personality completely opposite his appearance. And that is why even today, when people hear stories about Julius Carry, the most common reaction remains, "No way, show me the footage." Why people only believe. Julius Carry when they see him with their own eyes. Sho'nuff burst onto screens in 1985 as an inexplicable phenomenon. A secondary villain with less than 20 minutes of screen time, not even marketed by the studio as a selling point of The Last Dragon. The film earned only about 33 million USD, was rated average by critics at the time, and sat outside every major award conversation of the 1980s. Nothing indicated that Sho'nuff would be remembered, even after opening weekend. Yet 40 years later, Julius Carry's red and black street samurai armor, the towering spiked hair, the blazing stare, and the line, "Am I the meanest?" have flooded the internet as if the character had always been a cultural monument. Sho'nuff memes run across Twitter. Now X appear in thousands of TikTok videos, show up as Reddit profile icons, and morph into endless fan art across Instagram. No one can believe that a character once dismissed as too much too weird and too unrealistic turned out to be the perfect fit for the digital age, an era where exaggeration is its own universal language. This revival began in the 1990s, when VHS exploded and The Last Dragon was re-released. For the first time, audiences weren't seeing the film through the lens of critics. They watched it for its uniqueness, for the boldness that 1980s Hollywood rarely dared to take. Young viewers didn't care how the film had been reviewed. They simply saw Julius Carry appear and understood that Sho'nuff wasn't a bad role, but the definition of a style. From there, the story took a turn no one expected. Sho'nuff became an underground cultural phenomenon, what film fans call a cult classic icon, a character who doesn't need awards, because he survives on something far more important: collective memory. By the late 1990s, that influence spread beyond the screen. At New York Comic-Con, Dragon Con, and Long Beach Comic Expo, people began cosplaying Sho'nuff with astonishing detail: hand-sewn armor, hand-placed studs, and the exact hair silhouette from 1985. They even recreated the glow, the supernatural aura from the film. But the most striking part was this: no one cosplayed him as a joke. They cosplayed him as a form of homage. Even people who had never seen the movie recognized the character, repeated his lines, and understood exactly what the image represented: flamboyant, unapologetic power. Then Sho'nuff took over social media. Memes like "Kiss My Converse" and "Am I the Baddest" became ways for young people to express confidence, irony, and sometimes personal style statements. Gen Z, many born after Julius Carry passed away in 2008, use Sho'nuff memes daily as if they lived through the 1980s themselves. To them, Sho'nuff isn't an old character. He feels like a symbol created precisely for their era. The influence even reached hip-hop. In 1998, Busta Rhymes walked into the MTV VMAs in an outfit nearly identical to Sho'nuff's, from colors to hairstyle to the fierce stance. It wasn't a parody. It was a cultural declaration. Sho'nuff is the DNA of boldness. From then on, the character's imagery popped up in music videos, album covers, and countless underground performances. And when Gen Z revisited The Last Dragon through DVD, Blu-ray, and YouTube, they reacted entirely differently. From earlier generations, they believed every story about Julius Carry was true. Because on screen there were no tricks, no VFX, no slow motion. Only Julius Carry, and a performance so strong that everything assumed to be exaggeration suddenly felt like obvious truth. 40 years have passed, and hundreds of martial arts films have come and gone. But Sho'nuff still stands not because of budget, not because of critical praise, but because of the performance of a man who made audiences admit no one believes the stories about Julius Carry until they see him themselves. If you want to continue exploring film stories that sound like legends, but are completely real, like Julius Carry's journey as Sho'nuff, don't forget to follow the channel, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment telling us which character you want us to decode next.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.